What's up and welcome to the video. I'm Dr. Daniel Ricciardi, gut health expert, licensed pharmacist, fitness enthusiast, and creator of SIBO Shortcut. This week's video is going to be a little different. Today, I'm actually going to watch a documentary and react to it in real time as I'm watching it. The documentary that I'm going to be watching today, it's not new. It actually came out in 2019. It's called The Game Changers. I do know the gist of the documentary. It seems like it's going to be a documentary that's emphasizing why plant-based diet is superior to animal-based diet. As a full disclosure, I'm not pro plant-based diet. I'm not pro animal-based carnivore diet. I am pro eating whole, real, natural foods that don't have additional ingredients in them. I think people can be healthy and free of chronic diseases if they make actual, real, whole food choices and are not eating processed foods. Obviously, there's a bunch of other variables in there as well. But in terms of diet, eating single ingredient foods, this is the #1 thing I care the most about. All right, so without further ado, this documentary looks like it's an hour and 23 minutes. So let's see what it has in store. All right, so the intro comes at you pretty hot. It's got people sprinting up hills, got people boxing, swinging the battle ropes that you see in the gym where you swing your hands up and down and the rope moves. Basically all this really athletic type stuff.
I step in the same way. Now my hand slides down, and where are we at? I've been teaching fighting techniques to government agencies for over 15 years, including the U.S. Marines, U.S. Marshals, U.S. SWAT teams, and U.S. Navy SEALs.
The video starts and they introduce, I guess, the main character, the person who's creating this documentary. His name is James Wilkes. He's a gentleman from the UK, mixed martial arts fighter. This guy, he's a pretty badass dude, to be honest. So he actually trains people in the military right now, various types of combat. He was a professional mixed martial arts fighter in the UFC. So pretty impressive resume this guy has in terms of his athletic accomplishments.
Archaeologists recovered the remains of at least 68 gladiators. There have been more than 5,000 bones analyzed for the study. We found in the cross-section of the bone very high bone mineral density, which indicated intense training and high-quality diet to build up strong muscles and strong bones. This diet gave the gladiators a nickname Hordiari, which means beans and barley muncher. We know different food sources give different amounts of strontium in the bones. High strontium levels in vegetarians, low strontium levels in carnivores. If there is low strontium in the sample, the flame will stay blue. If there is high strontium levels, it will change from blue to red. The gladiators were predominantly vegetarian.
All right, I'm not a history buff, but I do know that the Roman gladiators were fighting against their will. They're basically held hostage and were forced to fight to the death. So I can appreciate the gladiator, warrior, UFC mixed martial arts parallel here on him looking to do what gladiator type people did, but I'm not 100% sold on this. On this strontium thing, I don't know what they're talking about whatsoever. I've never heard this as a factor in terms of bone density and one being better than another. Maybe it is, but I haven't heard of this. This term Hordiari as well, that they say means beans and barley muncher. Because the Roman gladiators were not free and forced to fight against their will, I don't know if this name is a compliment or more used in a derogatory setting. Also, from my understanding of gladiators, there's a lot of evidence suggesting that they were actually obese, eating this high plant-based, high carb, low animal protein diet.
Even in the UFC, this idea that meat makes you tough had become a focal point for one of the most anticipated fights in the history of the sport, between Conor McGregor, the world champion in 2 different weight classes, and Nate Diaz, who accepted the fight with only 11 days' notice after McGregor's original opponent pulled out. McGregor was a big movement.
It's steaks every day for me. Steaks for breakfast, steaks for lunch, steaks for brunch, grass-fed, massaged, beef, all day long.
Diaz was on a plant-based diet. eat your vegetables.
Next thing up that they're talking about is a UFC, which is a mixed martial arts fight between Conor McGregor, who they consider follows an animal-based diet, versus Nate Diaz, who they're saying they follows a plant-based diet. A couple things I found interesting about this was Nate Diaz was naturally one weight class higher than Conor McGregor. So although he did beat them in the world of mixed martial arts, being bigger or weighing more than somebody else is a massive advantage. This was not discussed in the documentary.
I found in the locker room was some pretty outdated ideas about nutrition. You would go to a pre-game dinner with the football team and you would see this spread. There would be steak and chicken, very much protein oriented, because their perception was that the protein is what sustains their energy. But in fact, that's not the case. The actual energy for exercise comes mainly from carbohydrates in the form of glycogen that we store in our muscles. And when we sacrifice those carbohydrate calories for protein calories in our diet, what ends up happening is you will develop really chronic carbohydrate or glycogen depletion. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads to chronic fatigue and loss of stamina.
Now we have this doctor talking about diets and talking about how carbohydrates are the main source of energy, specifically for athletes, which I don't think anybody's really arguing that protein is like a primary energy source. It's well known as helping with muscle recovery and muscle growth. So I'm not really 100% sure why this is being included with this particular argument. The documentary goes on to emphasize additional athletes, such as this guy named Scott Jurek, who is an ultra marathoner running races over 100 miles long, which is incredibly impressive. There's also a sprinter, Morgan Mitchell, who has an amazing track record, no pun intended, in track. They even interview Arnold Schwarzenegger on here, arguably the greatest bodybuilder of all time. So there's definitely a wide range of people, from endurance athletes, speed athletes, combat athletes, bodybuilders. There's a lot of present and past athletes coming out and saying that they prefer a plant-based diet. Collectively, looking at everything in this documentary, I was a little disappointed in the production of this documentary. There's a lot of emphasis on shock and awe value, and I do believe that they looked at some research studies. However, for me personally, anytime a documentary is made and they only highlight the good parts of one side and they don't talk about any of the negatives of it, or they don't talk about any of the positives of the other side, it's a little difficult for me to just take it at face value. I'm sure there was some research that actually supports a lot of the stuff that was talked about in this video. However, picking and choosing certain studies and ignoring other ones isn't really a great way to go about making a documentary. For somebody like James that made this documentary, that ate a plant-based diet and actually had it benefit him, that goes a long way. People that have their own personal experiences are gonna talk very well on the strategies and methods that they used. And if it worked for him and all these other people, that's wonderful. At the same point, I'm not prepared to say you can make a blanket statement that everybody should go out and do this. I would also make the argument that all these athletes in this video, they didn't get to where they were as professionals from eating a plant-based diet. At least to the best of my knowledge, the people that were talked about in this documentary, they were not eating a plant-based diet throughout their entire life. If a certain diet does work for you, that's by all means amazing. However, people have also eaten animal products for thousands of years as well. And until the past century or a little bit more, there's virtually zero chronic disease in civilization. This was very uncommon that somebody would get a chronic disease. So from my perspective and from my understanding, it's much more of a testament to the quality and types of foods that people are eating, such as these ultra processed foods, which have become a staple in most households, at least in the United States. So while this documentary is trying to highlight the shock and awe factor, where if you eat a plant-based diet, you can become an Olympian or this crazy, amazing athlete, I would argue that you can become an amazing athlete, Olympic caliber athlete, not because you ate a plant-based diet. I don't want to say in spite of it. However, from my personal experience with health in general, gut health, including animal-based meat, protein in your diet tends to be useful for almost everybody. Final thing I'm going to add, everybody's always arguing what you should eat, which foods are good, which foods are bad. If you found something that works for you and you feel really good, it obviously makes the most sense to continue with that. And you're probably going to tell other people how good the diet you're doing is. I would just caution anybody that tends to be too one-dimensional thinking on diet that everyone's body's different and is going to react differently to different foods. So as I mentioned before, I think the best diet is always going to be single ingredient, whole foods. That's my only one real pet peeve with diet. Anything else, do what works best for you. That is all for today. If you enjoy this type of review video, please let me know down in the comments below. If you're new to my channel, I post a new full-length video every Monday in YouTube Shorts throughout the week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.